This is the Music Halls of Fame podcast. This week we honored the year in music for 2019 along with a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame class of 2019. We also look at the case for putting Rick Rubin into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, plus our spotlight museum is the Graceland Mansion and Museum in Memphis, Tennessee. Before we get going with the podcast, like everyone tells you, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you'll know when these podcast episodes drop, which is usually every Thursday. Now, on to this week's episode. Now that the class of 2024 has officially been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, it is time to start looking at who will hopefully be inducted into the class of 2025. One of the biggest snubs from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame voters is to not have producer Rick Rubin in the hall. For starters, he co-founded the record label that brought hip-hop to the masses, Def Jam, along with Russell Simmons, who's also not nominated. Rick is so much more, though. He is also one of the most influential producers of the last 40 years. He's been nominated for 21 Grammy Awards, winning 8 of them, including Album of the Year twice for the albums with the Dixie Chicks, now known as the Chicks, along with Adele. He's been nominated for Producer of the Year at the Grammys 5 times, winning twice. Here is a list of artists who he's either produced or executive produced their albums for. LL Cool J, The Beastie Boys, Run DMC, Slayer, Public Enemy, The Cult, the Less Than Zero soundtrack, Danzig, Andrew Dice Clay, The Black Crowes, The Ghetto Boys, The Red Hot Chili Peppers with the Blood Sugar Sex Magic album, Johnny Cash's last few albums. I mean, who can really forget Johnny Cash's version of 9 Inch Nails' Hurt? His version rips a hole in my heart every time I hear it. Let's continue. Sir Mix-a-Lot, Tom Petty, Lords of Acid, 9 Inch Nails, AC/DC, Donovan, System of a Down, Sheryl Crow, Melanie C, Rage Against the Machine, Eagle Eye Cherry, Macy Gray, Aerosmith, Audioslave, Limp Bizkit, Jay-Z, Slipknot, Lil Jon and the East Side Boys, Weezer, Shakira, The Chicks, Justin Timberlake, U2, Linkin Park, Poison, Vanessa Carlton, Neil Diamond, Jacob Dylan, Metallica, Pete Yorn, Brandy Carlisle, Typo Negative, Josh Groban, Kid Rock, Adele, ZZ Top, Lana Del Rey, Black Sabbath, Kanye, Eminem, Lady Gaga, Ed Sheeran, the Wu-Tang Clan, James Blake, Billy Corgan, and the Smashing Pumpkins. Seriously, what more do you need to know about the guy in order to put him in the hall? Rick is not eligible as a performer, but he can get in on one of the other subcommittees. I mean, Phil Spector's in as a producer, so it's possible to get Rick in for the, let's say, Award for Musical Excellence. Therefore, Rick Rubin should be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in the Musical Excellence category, and if they don't put him in 2025, there is something seriously wrong with the Hall of Fame. Before we go any further, we'd like to tell you that there is now a Music History in Depth podcast where we go more in depth on a few of the events that happened in music history for that particular week. The Music History in Depth podcast drops every Tuesday on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast from, as does our Music History Today podcast, which goes over the daily events in music history. The Music History Today podcast drops daily, including weekends, on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, back to this podcast. The year was 2019. In music, the R. Kelly documentary, Surviving R. Kelly, helped to bring sex abuse charges against the singer. The Michael Jackson documentary, Leaving Neverland, created a firestorm of backlash against the late singer, causing many radio stations to drop his songs, only to put them back on the air a few months later after the documentary had died down with all the cancel culture. cancel culture does have a very short shelf life and attention span sometimes. Meanwhile, singer and actor Jussie Smollett reported that he was attacked by two men who hurled racial epithets against him in Chicago, Illinois. Chicago police later figured out that Jussie's report was, well, to be nice about it, not true. A report in the New York Times Magazine finally revealed that a 2008 fire on the Universal Studios backlot in Los Angeles not only destroyed the original Back to the Future set, but also destroyed a warehouse that held a lot of master copies of famous songs and albums. Music industry records were broken all year. Lil Nas X and Billy Ray Cyrus's Old Town Road broke the record for the longest consecutive weeks at number 1 on the Billboard Singles Chart, spending 17 weeks at the top and beating the old record of 16. After first appearing on the charts in 1994 and after a change in Billboard magazine's chart rules allowing Christmas music to be included onto the Hot 100 Singles Chart, Mariah Carey's modern-day Christmas classic, All I Want for Christmas Is You, finally hit number 1 on the Billboard Singles Chart. It broke several records, including the slowest climb to number 1 with 35 chart weeks, longest number of years between its debut and hitting number 1 at 25 years. It also became the last number 1 song of the 2010s and the first number 1 song of the 2020s. And in doing so, it made Mariah the first artist to have a number 1 song in 4 separate decades. Bands that formed in 2019 included Everglow, Dice, Sunday Service, Simple Creatures, and Boys World. Bands that either broke up before their inevitable reunions or announced their hiatus included DNCE, Fifth Harmony, One Direction, Fun, The Muffs, Boyzone, Slayer, Spandau Ballet, Prophets of Rage, and Toto. Roxette, Linkin Park, The Cranberries, and Divinyls all disbanded due to the deaths of their popular lead singers. Bands that reformed in 2019 included Alphabeat, Bauhaus, Bikini Kill, The Black Crowes, Heart, The Jonas Brothers, Men at Work, My Chemical Romance, Rage Against the Machine, Stereolab, Supergrass, and the Pussycat Dolls. As far as albums went, Taylor Swift's Lover was the biggest selling album of the year. Other big albums came from BTS, Harry Styles, Madonna, the Backstreet Boys, the Jonas Brothers, Tool, Post Malone, along with the soundtracks to the movies A Star is Born and Bohemian Rhapsody, and the reissue of the Beatles classic Abbey Road. The biggest singles of the year were Lil Nas X and Billy Ray Cyrus's Old Town Road, Ariana Grande's Thank You Next, and her other single, 7 Rings, Post Malone and Sway Lee's Sunflower, Shawn Mendes and Camila Cabello's Señorita, Lizzo's Truth Hurts, the Jonas Brothers' Sucker, Halsey's Without Me, Travis Scott's Highest in the Room, Louis Capaldi's Someone You Loved, Selena Gomez's Lose You to Love Me, Post Malone's Circles, and The Weeknd's Heartless. Country music had a major controversy about what exactly was a country music song. Lil Nas X's Old Town Road was originally a number 1 song on the country charts until Billboard magazine decided that the country trap song wasn't country enough. And then Blanco Brown's The Get Up had the exact same problem. The conversation about what type of music was country and who was country, usually surrounding the question as to whether more black country artists can be successful in country music, continues to this very day. Note the reaction to Beyoncé's country album. The biggest country music albums for the year included Jason Aldean's 9, Cody Johnson's Ain't Nothing to It, Florida Georgia Line's Can't Say I Ain't Country, Thomas Rhett's Centerpoint Road, Tyler Childers' Country Squire, Luke Combs' The Prequel, Blake Shelton's Fully Loaded, God's Country, George Strait's Honky Tonk Time Machine, Maren Morris's Girl, and the Highway Women's self-titled album. The biggest country music songs included Luke Combs' Beautiful Crazy, Beer Never Broke My Heart, and Even Though I'm Leaving, along with Blake Shelton's God's Country, Blanco Brown's The Get Up, Marshmello and Kane Brown's One Thing Right, Morgan Wallen's Whiskey Glasses, Brett Young's Here Tonight, Chris Lane's I Don't Know About You, and Luke Bryan's Knockin' Boots. In hip-hop, the biggest albums of the year were put out by Lil Nas X, Travis Scott, Lizzo, Post Malone, J. Cole, Lil Tecca, Lil Uzi Vert, Blueface, Logic, and Kanye, who put out a gospel hip-hop album called Jesus is King. In hip-hop singles, Lil Nas X's Old Town Road was one of the biggest songs of the year, along with his follow-ups, Panini and Futsal Shuffle 2020, both going top 5. Post Malone also had a good year with 4 songs that hit the top 3 on the hip-hop charts: Circles, Sunflower, Wow, and Goodbyes. Other big songs included Travis Scott's Highest in the Room, Lizzo's Truth Hurts, and also her song Good as Hell, Cardi B and Bruno Mars's Please Me, J. Cole's Middle Child, and Lil Tecca's Ransom. Dance music was so diverse in 2019 that not one song spent more than 1 week at the top of the Billboard Club Play chart. This was also the last full year of the chart for a couple of years, as the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdowns of entertainment venues meant that there was no need for the chart for most of 2020 and 2021. After all, no clubs, no club play. Having said that, though, songs by the usual pop and hip-hop dance artists made it to the top of the other dance charts, like Jennifer Lopez, Katy Perry, Ariana Grande, and Ava Max. Some were kind of head-scratching, like Sting and Mark Ronson. As far as the more quote-unquote legit EDM artists went, some of the more popular songs included Chris Lake's Stay With Me, Peggy Gou's Starry Night, Sophie Tucker and Juice's Me Rumba, Fisher's You Little Beauty, and Major Laser's Can't Take It With You. The top 10 DJs on DJ's Top 100 DJs chart list for that year were Dimitri Vegas and Like Mike, Martin Garrix, David Guetta, Armin van Buuren, Marshmello, Don Diablo, Oliver Heldens, Tiesto, Afrojack, and Steve Aoki. The biggest Latin artist of the year for 2019 was Bad Bunny. Other big Latin artists were Ozuna, Anuel AA, J Balvin, Luis Fonsi, Aventura, Sek, Farruko, Daddy Yankee, Pedro Capo, Romeo Santos, Jay Cortez, and Taney. Musical movies that opened in 2019 included Rocket Man, Wild Rose, Yellow Rose, the live-action version of Disney's Aladdin, Frozen 2, and the CGI version of Disney's The Lion King. Also yesterday, Blinded by the Light, Judy, and also Cats, which was universally panned. Musicals or revivals of musicals that opened in 2019 included Hadestown, Tina, the Tina Turner musical, Tootsie, Moulin Rouge, Kiss Me Kate, Beetlejuice, and Oklahoma. Major musical deaths in 2019 included Eddie Bunny, James Ingram, Keith Flint of The Prodigy, Doris Day, Chuck Barksdale of The Dells, Leon Redbone, Rick Ocasek of The Cars, producer Busby, Peter Tork of The Monkees, Bushwick Bill of The Ghetto Boys, drummer Hal Blaine, Dick Dale, Nipsey Hussle, Juice WRLD, Dr. John, South African musician Johnny Clegg of Johnny Clegg and Savuko, Murray Fredrickson of Roxette, drummer Ginger Baker, K-pop singer Gu Hara, bossa nova singer João Gilberto, Daryl Dragon, the captain in the Captain and Tennille, by the way, that is Daryl Dragon, pianist Andre Previn, opera singer Jesse Norman, Phil McCormick of Molly Hatchet, and Art Neville. In awards for the music of 2019, the year will be remembered as the year of Billie Eilish, as the singer had the second biggest album of the year and broke records all year, becoming the first artist to be born in the 21st century to have a #1 song and a #1 album on the Billboard charts. At the Grammy Awards for the music of 2019, Billie, along with her producer Phineas, grabbed the big 4 major awards at the same ceremony. Billie became the first female and only the second person to pull off that feat since Christopher Cross did it in the 1980s. Billie won Album of the Year for When We All Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go, Song and Record of the Year for Bad Guy, and Best New Artist. At the American Music Awards, Taylor Swift won Artist of the Year. At the Billboard Music Awards, Post Malone won Artist of the Year during a ceremony that got pushed until late in 2020 because of the pandemic. At the MTV Video Music Awards, Video of the Year went to Taylor Swift's You Need to Calm Down. Lizzo won Album of the Year for 'Cause I Love You, and Chris Brown and Drake won Best Song for No Guidance at the Soul Train Music Awards. Billie Eilish, Taylor Swift, Shawn Mendes, and Blackpink won the music categories at the People's Choice Awards. At the Eurovision Song Contest, which was held in Tel Aviv, Israel, Dutch entry Duncan Lawrence won with the song Arcade. Garth Brooks won Entertainer of the Year at the Country Music Association Awards, and Carrie Underwood won Entertainer of the Year at the Academy of Country Music Awards. Dave won Best British Album for Psychodrama, and Lewis Capaldi won Best Song for Someone You Loved at the Brit Awards. Alicia Cara won Best Album for The Pains of Growing, while Camila Cabello and Shawn Mendes won Best Song for Señorita, and Shawn Mendes won Artist of the Year at the Juno Awards. Dean Lewis won Album of the Year for A Place We Knew, and Guy Sebastian won Single of the Year for Choir at the ARIA Music Awards. At the Tony Awards, Hadestown won Best Musical, and Oklahoma won Best Revival of a Musical. The Pulitzer Prize for Music that year was won by Ellen Reed for the song Prism. Musically, at the Academy Awards, Elton John and Bernie Taupin won Best Song for I'm Gonna Love Me Again from Rocket Man, and the movie Joker won Best Original Score. Dave won the Mercury Music Prize for his album Psychodrama. The 2019 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony took place at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York. That year, the Hall inducted DeChantel's Maybe, the Champs' Tequila, Barrett Strong's Money, That's What I Want, the Isley Brothers' Twist and Shout, the Shangri-La's Leader of the Pack, and the Shadow of Night's Gloria into the singles category, which, honestly, they've only inducted twice in the last however many years they've been doing the award ceremony. Also, there were no other entries in the musical excellence or any of the other categories except for performers category. And in that category, the Hall inducted Janet Jackson, Stevie Nicks, Radiohead, Roxy Music, The Cure, The Zombies, and this next group. The group Def Leppard started in 1976 as the band Atomic Mass in the city of Sheffield, England, by school friends Rick Savage, Tom Kenning, and Pete Doubleday. Pete Willis joined in 1977 along with Nick Mackey, Andy Nicholas, Melanie Davis, Nick Hornt, and Paul Hampshire, as members were joining and leaving all the time, mainly because, well, they were all still in high school. Singer Joe Elliott auditioned to be one of the guitarists, but it was decided that he would become the lead singer. Guitarist Steve Clark and drummer Rick Allen came on board soon thereafter in 1978. The name Def Leppard came from a newspaper headline that read, quote, Def Leppard, Def Leppards Deformed, end quote. Right around the time that they were working on their EP, the Def Leppard EP, Kenning left the band and was replaced by Frank Noon. By the time all the band's shuffling finished and they released their debut album, the band consisted of Savage, Clark, Elliott, Allen, and Willis. The group released their debut album On Through the Night on March 14, 1980. The album originally didn't do too well except in the Sheffield area. Eventually, it caught on and at one time hit number 12 on the Billboard Albums chart. It also got the attention of legendary producer Mutt Lange, who produced AC/DC's legendary Back in Black album and would go on to craft Bryan Adams and Shania Twain's albums, along with marrying and then divorcing Shania. Mutt took a liking to the band and would go on to produce the band's next huge albums. Mutt and the band worked on the group's follow-up album, High and Dry, which was released on July 11, 1981. The band didn't have an official hit from the album, and the sales figures weren't exactly spectacular. The band, however, did have a music video for their song Bringin' On the Heartbreak, which would turn the song into a cult hit, as it was one of the first hard rock music videos that the fledgling TV channel MTV played. MTV would play a big part in the group's success with their third album. The group got to work with their third album, Pyromania. For this album, there were a few changes. The first was that they changed guitarists. Pete Willis was let go from the group for excessive drinking, something that would eventually help claim the life of their other guitarist, Steve Clark. Guitarist Phil Collen came on board from the band Girl in order to replace Willis. The band also changed their sound to a more glam rock sound instead of heavy metal. Mutt was again at the helm for this one. Pete Willis actually played most of the rhythm guitar and contributed songwriting on a few tracks before he was let go. The album was one of those rare cases when the album came out before the first song was even released. Pyromania was released on January 20th, 1983. The first single, Photograph, was released on February 3rd. What made the song and eventually the album so popular was that Photograph, their second single, Rock of Ages, and their third single, Foolin', all got heavy rotation airplay on MTV, which was in full swing by then as being a cultural musical force and a major record pusher. The album turned out to be the second biggest selling album of 1983, right behind that album by some guy who wore a sparkling single glove and did the moonwalk. To date, the album Pyromania has sold over 10 million certified sales, making it a diamond-selling album. Def Leppard began work on their follow-up album, Hysteria. However, tragedy struck when Rick Allen was involved in a car accident of his own making. On New Year's Eve 1984, Rick was driving his Corvette down a country road near Sheffield when he came up behind a slower car. And rather than slow up and get behind the other car, he tried to speed up to get around the car. Unfortunately for him, physics took over. He lost control of his Corvette, hit a wall, and crashed the car into a field, completely severing his left arm. Doctors frantically tried to reattach the arm, but eventually he had to have it amputated once it got an infection. Now, normally, that would be the end for a drummer. After all, you need your arms in order to play the drums. Rick was a different beast, however, and so was his band. Rather than quit the band, Rick and a few other people worked out a drum kit where he could drum with 2 feet and 1 arm. What's so amazing is that the band stuck by him and didn't even consider getting rid of him. The band did get another drummer to help Rick with drumming when they played a few tour warm-up gigs in Ireland, but they soon realized that Rick was going to be just fine, so the idea of a side drummer was squashed. In fact, during one gig, Rick drummed with one of the bones from his severed arm because, I don't know, eating a bat had already been done, I guess. Rock and roll, people. Rock and roll. All of this pushed back the making of Hysteria, but the album finally got released on August 3rd, 1987. Hysteria was a monster hit, selling over 10 million records, producing hit songs like Pour Some Sugar on Me, Animal, Love Bites, Armageddon It, and Rocket. Plus, making Def Leppard one of the few artists to have more than one original album sell over 10 million copies. It also helped producer Mutt Lange to cement his place as one of the most successful producers of all time after having sold 10 million records each with AC/DC's Back in Black, the Def Leppard albums, and a bunch of Shania Twain albums. After finishing up their successful Hysteria tour, they started work on their album Adrenalize. Tragedy would strike the band again, as guitarist Steve Clark's alcohol addiction spiraled out of control. He tried to get help, but on January 8, 1991, Steve's demons finally caught up with him. He passed away from taking prescription drugs and alcohol, which is never a good idea. The band pressed on without him and released Adrenalized on March 31st, 1992. The album was a hit, although it wasn't as big a hit as Pyromania or Hysteria. It spawned the songs Let's Get Rocked, Have You Ever Needed Someone So Bad, and Heaven Is. Before they went out on tour again, they auditioned guitarists to take Steve Clark's place and found Vivian Campbell, who used to play with Whitesnake and Dio. After that, the guys put out a bunch of different albums like Retroactive and Slang, but at this point, music had already changed. Grunge had taken over and basically kicked Def Leppard's style of rock to the curb. Plus, they almost had another tragedy when Vivian Campbell was diagnosed with cancer, which he thankfully recovered from. Through it all, Def Leppard never lost their legion of fans and continues to be a huge concert draw. They even did a couple of Las Vegas residencies. They still sell out arenas to this very day, even if their albums don't exactly sell 10 million copies like they used to. Throughout their career, Def Leppard released 12 albums, their last being 2022's Diamond Star Halos. They've been nominated for 7 American Music Awards, winning 2 of them in 1989. They were nominated for 6 MTV Video Music Awards, although they shockingly never won one, which is weird. To date, they have not been nominated for Grammy Awards, even though they really should have back in the 1980s. All right, so the critics don't love them. Doesn't matter. They've sold over 100 million records, and they've been called the 31st greatest hard rock artist, at least according to VH1. Presented for induction by Brian May of 2001 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductees Queen, Joe Elliott, Rick Allen, Vivian Campbell, Steve Clark, Phil Collin, Rick Savage, and, because he was on the first couple of albums, Pete Willis. The group Def Leppard inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame class of 2019, and we have put their biggest selling albums onto this week's podcast playlist, the link to which is in the show notes for you. Located on Elvis Presley Boulevard is Elvis's famous mansion, Graceland. The original owner of the 13.8 acres of the mansion was Stephen C. Toole, who owned a commercial printing firm. The land and the mansion were named after Toole's daughter, Grace. The mansion was built in 1939. Elvis Presley bought it in order to get away from the fans and the press since they kept showing up at his old place in Memphis. He paid $102,500 for Graceland on March 19, 1957. Graceland has a first floor and a basement. There's a second floor as well. However, it is closed to visitors. The second floor is where Elvis passed away in his bathroom. The floor is still maintained to be exactly as he left it on that fateful day on August 16, 1977, right down to the styrofoam cup on a shelf and the last record he ever listened to, which is still on the record player. Graceland is the second most popular house in America, right after the White House. It was opened as a museum on June 7, 1982. In 1991, it was added to the National Register of Historic Places. In 2006, it was declared a National Historic Landmark. Lisa Marie inherited the mansion in 1993 when she turned 25. She was already on record as saying that the house was never leaving the family, as she already had it in her will that the entire enterprise was going to go to her children, including the house, museum, etc., etc. Now that she has tragically passed away, there have been some unresolved issues with the will, much like a lot of things that include greed and egos these days. There was even a recent court case where an overseas company tried to lay claim to Graceland and legally steal it. Thankfully, a judge saw what was going on and moved to stop it from happening. Thankfully. Since Elvis's death, the property has grown from 13.8 acres to over 100 acres today. Today, there's not only the tour, but also the Presley Motors Automobile Museum, a museum dedicated to his career, along with his airplanes being on property. Elvis's grave, of course, is also there, along with both his mother, his father, his grandmother, and now, unfortunately, his daughter and grandson, both of whom passed away way too young. There's also a headstone in honor of his stillborn twin, Jesse Garin. Yes, Elvis had a twin, people. There's also a hotel with 450 rooms called the Elvis Guest House at Graceland, which also has 2 restaurants and a theater. Graceland is open 7 days a week from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Ticket prices go anywhere from $44 to $196, depending on the package. And, of course, with all museums these days, check their website first for updated ticket prices and hours of operation, especially during the holiday seasons. Their website is Graceland.com, and if you can't remember that simple website, well, we'll pop it down there on the show notes for you. There are a lot of stories that we can tell about Elvis, but this time we're going to talk about one of his songs. In 1968, musician and songwriter Mark James was a guy who was in demand. He had written songs that were very popular, especially in the southern United States. James had relocated from Houston, Texas to Memphis, Tennessee in order to write and record with Skepta Records. His wife didn't like the idea much and thought that James was up to no good sleeping around with whoever, which, for the record, he was not. The guy couldn't catch a break. She was always suspicious, and he felt like he was, well, caught in a trap that he couldn't walk out of. She kept nagging him so much, thinking that he was sleeping with whatever, or whoever, or wherever. That line, "caught in a trap," became the basis for the song he was working on one night while he was fooling around. On his guitar, not with another woman. He finished writing it, recorded the song, and then released it. Unfortunately for James, Skepta Records didn't do too much to help promote the song, so it died a miserable death. Fate, as luck would have it, would soon intervene on James's behalf, though. Enter Elvis Presley. For much of the 60s, after his release from military duty, Elvis had, well, gone Hollywood. While he still recorded a few decent songs for his movies, like Viva Las Vegas, still a classic, and a few not-so-good songs, like Clam Bake. Remember that one? Ooh, that was miserable. He was a long way from Heartbreak Hotel and closer to the Cheese Factory. Elvis in Hollywood had, to be honest with you, imploded his rock career. Dude lost his swagger and his street cred at the same time. Good thing, though, was that after a number of years, he actually realized this and decided to get back to putting out great songs. Earlier in 1968, he did a TV concert on NBC. The concert, where he sat with the audience around him, tan-trimmed and ready for action, dressed in black leather, was a huge success and signaled that the young Elvis with the swagger was back in business. Elvis's management decided to capitalize on his revitalized popularity and record a new album. As luck would have it, he recorded it at the same exact recording studio that James was working out of, and that gave James an opportunity. Since he was a hit songwriter, he was asked if he had any new songs that Elvis could sing. James knew that another popular singer named Tom Jones had a mature sound and said that if Elvis could get more mature songs to sing like Tom Jones had, then Elvis would be successful. And James had just the right song for Elvis. James got his song in front of Elvis's management, who got it in front of Elvis, who liked it, despite the fact that it had been recorded before. Elvis recorded the song in the early morning hours of January 23, 1969. The song almost wasn't recorded because of an argument over publishing rights. Those blessed publishing rights. James was entitled to more than half, but Elvis's people wanted at least half. And that left a bad taste in James's mouth. Elvis's recording label, RCA, stepped in and politely explained to James that there would be plenty of money for everybody to share because the song was going to be a big hit. James finally relented. By the way, RCA wasn't actually wrong on that one. The record company, as it turns out, was completely correct. On August 26, 1969, Elvis's version of the song Suspicious Minds was released and went directly to number 1 in America, top 10 in 9 other countries, and was the 18th biggest song of 1969. And the comeback album that it came from Elvis in Memphis, did pretty well too. The song that James wrote would end up being Elvis's last number 1 song in America. The song Suspicious Minds, as done by Elvis Presley, whose former mansion, Graceland, you can visit in Memphis, Tennessee. And that is it for the Music Halls of Fame podcast. Thank you very, very much for listening, or if you're on YouTube or Spotify, for watching. The Music Halls of Fame podcast is part of the Music History Today network, which can be found under Music History Today on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcast from, and also on our YouTube page under Music History Today. Thank you very much for listening.